the Pikes Peak Bulletin 2021 election forum, presented in partnership with the League of Women Voters of the Pikes Peak region. I'm Ralph Roughton, the Bulletin's Executive Editor Emeritus, which means that they've officially sent me out to pasture. And that'll be my last attempt at humor. I'll be your moderator tonight, and the goal of this forum is to present the views of the candidates seeking your votes and both sides of the District 14 ballot issue, all in a nonpartisan setting so that you, the voters, can make informed decisions. The views expressed this evening will be those of the candidates and speakers, not of the sponsoring organizations. To be clear, the Bulletin and the League of Women Voters never endorse or oppose candidates. Please remember to remain masked except for eating and drinking, and feel free to use the hand sanitizer on each table. Thanks to Annie Schmidt of Keithley Pines for making that happen. After consulting with a number of the people who will be talking tonight, there's a general agreement that if anyone is talking and feels comfortable not using a mask while talking, that's okay and should enhance communication considerably. Our schedule will go like this. We're going to begin. We'll get to it in a minute, but please silence your phones. Our schedule goes like this. We begin with the mayoral race, followed by the city council candidates. We'll then allow time for school board candidates to speak, and then we'll hear from both sides of the District 14 ballot issue. And our goal is to finish no later than 8:30 p.m. FYI, this ballot also has three statewide issues: Amendment 78, Proposition 119, and Proposition 120. And El Paso County also has a Tabor question asking voters to retain $15 million in excess tax revenue, with money going to parks and road improvements. Everyone should check out those four measures so that you can make your best choices. This election obviously is mail-in or drop-off ballot. El Paso County started mailing ballots last Friday. I got mine. How many have already gotten? Yeah, look at that. Great. If for some reason you don't get your ballot, contact 575-VOTE. That's the county's election central headquarters, or you can email elections@elpasoco.com. And then you can track your ballot, as always, at govotecolorado.gov. Our program will allow each candidate to make a 2-minute statement, then answer some prepared questions in contested races. I will share handwritten questions from the audience as time allows. And I have to say right here, it is unbelievable the number of quality questions that have already been turned in. This is so much better than any forum that we've ever done. In the past, they would just come in. Yeah, credit to you for coming here prepared and knowing what you would like to hear about. There's some difficult choices here trying to come up with the right questions. If you would like to submit a question, obviously you had the chance when you first got here, but to avoid disruption, hold up your question card and a League of Women Voters members will come by and collect it. As in the past, I'm combining the multiple questions on the same topic in order to avoid repetition. Housekeeping items, silence your phones, as we said. Also, any recording of tonight's event must be approved by the League of Women Voters and the Bulletin. The League of Women Voters is recording and uploading this event to its YouTube page, LMV Pikes Peak Region. Also, Channel 11 will be live streaming this as long as possible. Might have to leave before it's over, but hopefully not, and it will be available on the Channel 11 website, kktv.com. Restrooms in the foyer, that's most important for some people. Near the table with the candidates' literature out front. The candidates up here are seated alphabetically. The ground rules have been sent to the candidates ahead of time. However, the questions certainly have not. Before we start, I should mention that if you saw the bulletin from October 7th, you might have seen there was a glitch in the design process. It cut off the end of John Graham's statement. It should have ended with, "Continuity will be a key factor in seeing things come to fruition." We apologize for that error, and we will move forward. With that, we move to the mayoral candidates straight in. We have 3 candidates running for mayor. They're all here. Alan Delwich, Tyler Grafe, who is a write-in candidate, and John Graham, the incumbent. The mayor serves a 2-year term. We'll have 2-minute statements followed by questions from me, and then assimilating the audience questions. We'll go in alphabetical order. Alan Delwich.
Okay, I have just 2 minutes, so let me just say good evening and thank you all for coming out. I'm Alan Delwich and I'm running for mayor. As a planning commissioner for 26 years and a resident for 39 years, I know that quality of life and tourism are always center stage in Manitou. Our primary mission should always be to be true to ourselves and maintain the character and livability of our community. We made major strides to redevelop the East End and are in the final months of new sidewalks, undergrounding, and streetscapes on the West End. Now a slight pivot is in order. If elected, with support of City Council, I will commit to revitalizing our residential neighborhoods. Our residential streets and infrastructure need some attention. Recently, the Manitou Public Works Department reported on the conditions of our streets. Less than half of our residential streets are in satisfactory or good condition. There's probably no surprise to that here. On our present course, the 5-year plan would be to repair only a fraction of these streets in need. With increased funding, we can do much more and we can do it much more quickly. I will support an accelerated schedule of street repavement and neighborhood revitalization, including green infrastructure wherever possible. So how will we do this? Where will we get the money? So my idea is currently we're only collecting 60% of the marijuana tax that voters passed in 2013. I will propose that immediately we begin collecting the remaining share of the tax that we approved in 2013. This will increase revenue by about 1.4 million. And these increased revenues can be dedicated to our neighborhood. So basically with a little imagination, we can get a lot done. Thank you. I would ask for your support and your vote.
Before Tyler Grafe goes next, I will say that we have a timer here who will be holding up cards to tell people when their time is growing short. When you see stop, it doesn't mean that you have to stop in mid-sentence, but it does mean you just have a few seconds left, maybe 5 seconds or so to wrap it up, or 7 seconds, whatever. Okay, next, Tyler Grafe.
Good evening. Check. Thank you for having me tonight. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I think the first question is the why. Why am I here? And I think it's why you're all here. We all love Manitou. We all care deeply about Manitou. And also we have a deep respect for Manitou. I think we all, as residents, have that unique, idealistic mountain life that we want. And I think it often comes ahead with the tourism, and it's sort of just the nature of living in a beautiful place. You know, when I first started this endeavor as mayor, I thought, well, I better get my eggs in a basket. I've got a few decades of less experience, and so I immediately started doing my research. And, you know, between tax revenue, infrastructure, fire mitigation, water, the complexities go on, you know. You can almost, we could spend 2 hours debating about water tonight, you know. And it's in this that, it's funny, then Rhonda Van Pelt emailed me. She said, Ty, I need a 200-word statement for the bulletin. And I thought to myself, I got a 50-word research paper, but 200 words, I can't break down governing a city to 200 words. And here was the sort of the solution of why I was running for politics. We all have the same concerns, but it's our expectation to do the due diligent research and to sort of break it down into cohesive, simple solutions, okay? And I think that is the greatest challenge in Manitou. Often, problems, we seek solutions via problems, but also often the solutions become problems in of themselves. And with Manitou, we have such a unique atmosphere, which is a blessing and a curse in and of itself. But I think we really need to be extremely diligent about the things that we go about doing. Adding, taking away, etc. I think there's common sense things that we can do with what we already have that aren't being done. And I think I could go on all night, I apologize.
And finally, we have John Graham. John?
Like a Jedi. Laser sword. Good evening, thank you. I'm seeking re-election to provide stability and continuity in government. 2 years is not a lot of time to get things done, particularly when there are many challenges. I think we've caught stride. I'd like to see some things get finished. 2 years ago, my main three topics were to manage the incline, to deal with parking, traffic, congestion, that whole cluster of problems. And then the third thing was to push hard on capital improvements. We've made substantial progress in all those areas. We need to keep going. I looked at how I spent my time in the last year or so, and I think I only spent about 15% of the time doing what I thought was really important, and we still got some things done. What we do have a lot of concerns about are people things and culture, so I think if we want to have good continuity in our government, we need to talk about our culture. The city staff has exhibited, I think, real competence in dealing with problems, but they need stability. They're in the process of building a real team, a strong team, and I'd like to see that continue. I think building a strong, systematic, solution-oriented culture among city employees, council, and the community at large will be key to our future sustainability, regardless of the problems we're addressing. I think city council basically sets policy and gives direction. The day-to-day operations fall to the staff. They're really the key to our future. Also, we need to build a community culture. I think a mix of community spirit and community stewardship is important. If we can provide good service, steady progress, and sound financial stewardship, I think we'll give you a city you can be proud of. And you are the citizens that we need. We need your support, your interaction, your involvement. So please, you're very much part of the solution. And lastly, remember we don't live in isolation. We need effective alliances with our neighboring jurisdictions. Highway 24, fire mitigation, access to recreational land, those are shared problems. Thanks.
Okay, from there, we'll move into some general questions that we've pre-prepared. And your answers can be up to 2 minutes, but if they're shorter, that's welcomed as well. Because the more questions we can ask, the better. First, and this is for all three in the same order that you just presented, starting with Alan Delwich. What experience and specific skills do you bring that separate you from your opponents?
I'd say the main difference is that I have been involved with the city through boards, commissions, committees over the last 25 years. I've been a member of the Planning Commission, chair of the Planning Commission. I've participated on the Housing Authority Board, various strategic plans. Of course, I think a lot of us have done that, but over that time, I've really learned a lot about what our passions are, what our needs are, what our concerns are. And as I said at the opening, tourism and quality of life are constantly coming up. And I've really heard a lot of that over the years and have a lot of interest in solving those problems. My background is engineering. I was a software developer for several decades, and since I retired the first time in the mid-90s, I've been very involved with our community and the governance. You know, I guess that's what I bring to the table.
Tyler Gray.
I think part of why I'm running is I want to set aside some differences for the community that I think could be an advantage. And I think, you know, when you're a kid, you're sort of just chaotic potential, you know, you could manifest yourself in any sort of ways. And, you know, by the time you reach a certain age, you're sort of constrained by your own framework of society, I think. And I think a big issue with local politics these days is there maybe is a lack of creative initiative. And I think we really do need to get young people more involved in local politics. You know, I think we need to really, you know, I hate to say this, but I think we need to be a bit more diligent with preserving, okay? And I think that's something that people wouldn't expect of me being young, is that I'm going to make these changes, these radical changes. I have all, and my sort of overarching theme is less is more. You know, we need to be extremely diligent about what we're doing. And I think the best thing I could bring to the table is extremely diligent thought process. You know, I'm a careful thinker. I try to say I critically think as much as possible. And we need to really be careful going forward of how we're going to set in stone these ideas for the next 20 years.
Thank you. Basically, my introduction to Manitou life and politics came largely when I owned and operated the Pikes Peak Journal. That was the weekly newspaper before the Bulletin. I ran that from about 1978 till 1997. It had been in my family. I grew up in the business. Grew up kind of on part of the time on Ruxton Avenue, definitely in downtown Manitou. Running a newspaper, it was a small town newspaper, obviously, and I did a little bit of everything. And I think I saw Manitou in all its flavors and all of its various personalities across all the seasons. I covered city council, wrote editorials, involved in a lot of things. Raised two boys with my wife here. Essentially, I was born here, so I've spent most of my life in Manitou. I love the place.
Thank you. Next question, we'll go in reverse order this time. So John Graham will start and going back the other way. What do you think are Manitou's 2 or 3 most urgent needs, and how would you solve them?
Okay. Urgent, and I'm glad you specified urgent. There's a difference between urgent and important. Sometimes they can be the same. I think one of the huge problems we're facing, and we've been dealing with to some degree, is parking, transportation, and congestion. We've been working hard on that. I think we need to keep working. It's going to be a multi-year project. Capital improvements, certainly, I mean, it's very common for any member of city council to hear people complaining about the streets. And that's only part of the problem. It's not just the streets, it's what's under the streets. Oftentimes old water and sewer lines. A year ago, I think we got the prize, the city crew got the prize. They pulled out an old pipe it had a date of 1905 on it. We're living on a time bomb in places, so we need to really hit capital improvements. I guess the third thing, I think community spirit. COVID, I think, has really kind of knocked us down. We haven't had a chance to get out and be the kind of people we'd like to be. No coffin races this year. There was talk about having a potluck. That would have been great. We would have been able to see each other. I mean, it's nice to be able to see you even with masks on here. So I think our basic, the stride that we have as a community of seeing each other and interacting, that's hurt. And I think it'd be good for us to do whatever we can to get back to it.
You know, in my many weeks of research, there was one arcing theme that I always came back upon, and it's simply this, that when you dial 911 in Manitou Springs, you're getting connected to a Colorado Springs operator. When you go to the hospital, you're going to go to a Colorado Springs hospital. When, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I think the best thing Manitou Springs could do in the long term is to set us up as a sovereign municipality as much as possible. I think the interlock between Manitou Springs and Colorado Springs has become a detriment to Manitou Springs, in which we are, you know, I don't want to say we're bullied by Colorado Springs, because that's disingenuous to say. We get utilities from them, we get so many services from them, and we really need to have a strong relationship with them. But I think going forward, the best thing Manitou could do for itself would to be set itself up as an independent municipality, which we are, yet we don't have the services which we require for a municipality. Secondly, I think I love 19th century brick. I'm a big fan of it. I love the history of Manitou, but beyond that, I think we need to conserve the mountains. I think nature is more important than anything, and I think that drive coming down 24, looking at that mountains, I think we need to be very diligent about what pathways, and obviously we need to do something with the traffic, but we need to be very, sacred with our mountains. I mean that sincerely. Thirdly, it is a challenge with our infrastructure. We have aging infrastructure, and yet I wonder if we've done enough to mitigate what's going to happen. You know, if we got another big flood, if we got another some sort of overwhelming disaster, even our electrical grid isn't exactly tip-top. So we really need to, going forward, make sure that the basic necessities of the residents are going to be satisfied. You know, that's the basic role of government.
Yeah, I think unquestionably how we handle tourism and traffic congestion is a top issue, and we will talk about solutions to that for a long time. The question is, where are we going to store all those cars, or can we figure out how to keep the cars out of Manitou and keep the tourists in? That's one issue. Another issue is our pressure on development. We need to work hard to make sure that development in our town doesn't change our town to the detriment of what we all love, the charm, the historic buildings, our green space, and so on. But then the most important thing that I see, the most critical challenge we have, is climate change and how we deal with it. We can't just keep ignoring it. There's an article today in the paper, 85% of the people on this planet are facing detriment because of what's already happening with climate change. So we have to put that at the top of the list and really work on a daily basis to do whatever we can to mitigate the issues related to climate change. Thank you.
The last of the pre-prepared questions here, and then we'll get to some audience questions. If a citizen-led initiative produced a future ballot issue changing the Manitou mayor's term from 2 years to 4 years, what would be your response to that and why? Start with you, Alan.
Okay, I've gone back and forth on this, and for a while I thought, this 2-year term is pretty cumbersome, but as I've analyzed it more, talked to other people, talked to former mayors, I've convinced myself that the 2-year term is probably most appropriate. And the challenge is, if it gives us a chance, if you think about it, we have 3 at-large candidates elected 1 term. 2 years later, we have 3 ward candidates. And if you got a block of a mayor and three candidates that were so lockstep and really not meeting the needs of the community, it'd be a 4-year wait to ever change it. And this 2-year cycle for one of the offices does give us that ability to shift in midstream if we ever get to that point. Hopefully we never will. That's why I'm sort of comfortable with staying with the 2-year term.
That's a good question. You know, I'm not sure this will be a sufficient answer, but as far as I can tell, the 2-year policy allows for more community involvement and more community flexibility. Whether or not would it be a negative to have someone for 4 years? I don't know. We have a president for 4 years. So, you know, it's sort of an arbitrary question. It's sort of a difficult question. But I think at the end of the day, you know, maybe 4 years wouldn't be too bad. Maybe it would make us be a little more careful about who we're choosing, and maybe we could get a little more done then. I think certainly the 2 years is a little constraining for sure. You know, there's pros and cons, and that's why we're here to discuss these issues.
Thank you. I figured somebody would ask this question. It always comes up. You know, and I've thought a lot about it myself. Really, 2 years is not a lot of time to get something done. You have a year when you're new to the job, and then a year when you think you kind of know what you're doing. Sometimes it would be better to have more experience and then be able to capitalize on that with a 4-year term. I'm kind of ambivalent on that. One of the questions that I've asked people when they've asked me that question is, should we have 2-year city council terms? Because if you look at the last 2 elections, or now with this election, we've got contested positions here that, you know, in each of the last, the two elections, the only thing that was contested was the mayor. The city council people were all, you know, not contested. We had one candidate for each seat. And I don't mean to any way to negate the council we have. I'm really proud to serve for the people we have, and they work hard. But I wonder if we don't discourage people with the amount of work that's involved. They say, this is a 4-year commitment. I could go to college in that amount of time. You know, I'd be smarter probably in 4 years. Anyway, you know, I guess that's a question. I can see that there's a much larger question looming, and that's maybe it's time to take a look at the city charter, to look at how we manage things, how things are structured, because there's some things that I think are particularly awkward. And again, when these questions come up, I ask myself, what's a better condition? What's a better solution? I haven't figured a lot of that out, but I think that's probably down the road. We've got enough problems to face right now.
Okay, now we'll move on to audience questions. And again, much appreciated the participation. This is incredible. And I know some of you will be frustrated if your question doesn't get asked, but believe me, I'm sitting here looking at about 30 cards, and we don't have the time, but I've tried to assimilate them. I'm going to start though with a couple of questions that were directed at just one person instead of everyone. And this question is to John Graham. Please explain the location of the proposed fire training tower.
Okay, all right, let me do a little backup on this. 4 years ago, the question came up. It was a $4 million bond issue. The voters were asked to support a fire training facility, and that would have been located at the Public Works facility. Okay, that was voted down 3-1. I think it was actually 77% to 23 in favor. Okay, it went down basically in flames. That was $4 million. It was not just fire training, not just a fire training tower, but also they had, you know, a classroom. I believe they had some garages. So that went down. Following that, I think the fire department, I think they kind of felt beat up, and they looked to find a place that they could do a fire training tower, a scaled down version of what they'd originally asked for. They wanted to get it as far away from Manitou and still from people and still be in the city limits. So that's the reason they picked it. We own the land. It's in a fairly remote location. It's behind a bluff. It's going to be up by where the water filtration plant is. You can see it from a few trails in Manitou, but basically not from downtown or from pretty much any residential neighborhood. So it was hidden, and the firemen also, they did it for a budget of less than $400,000, so a tenth of what they were originally asked for. So I think they made a sincere effort to find a place that was suitable. I realized the neighborhood that you take the road to get up there, they're upset about that. We had a lot of comment from them. I think council listened to them. We also heard from a lot of proponents who wanted that fire tower. Certainly a lot of them were firemen, and I think the long-term benefit is we're going to have if we're going to have a volunteer fire department, we need to be able to make training something that they can need in their lives. That they give us their time. We need to give them the opportunity to do it close to home.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Alan Delwich. You initially pulled papers to run for council, then later you switched to run for mayor again. Could you explain your rationale behind this?
Yeah, when I first decided to run, I was looking at the ward seat as a possibility, and as I analyzed it and talked to people, there was a lot of interest in having a competitive race for mayor, and I thought about it and thought about raising issues and having conversations, and I decided that it would be more appropriate to run for that office, and so that's why I changed my focus.
Thank you. Here's a question for all three, and I would just say you can answer in any order you want on this one. Will you take a more clear and concrete position to incorporate climate crisis and environmental concerns into our city policies and codes? And how could you do that?
I have the mic, so I'll do it first. Absolutely, it's not a would, it's a must. We must do it, and we should have done it 2 years ago. We should have done it last year. Things aren't getting better, and we have to figure out how we can put this at top of mind all the time.
This is an issue that affects all of us, and particularly us being here in such a beautiful place in the nook of the Rockies. We need to really make sure we're doing our part to tackle climate change. That being said, I think Manitou Springs has had enough share, whether it's the fire, the floods. We've had enough here in Manitou where I think enough is already being done, where we have our watershed. Honestly, I'm thoroughly impressed by the conservation in that watershed. We should all really, as a community, be proud of that. Fire mitigation is something that we do need to tackle, and that's for sure going to be probably at the forefront. I think that I put that above floods in the coming 20 years, 30 years. That is really something that could threaten all of Manitou. Just a year ago, we had that homeless gentleman set the fire by the incline, and that could have been it right there. Everything we fight and love for could have been lost just like that. So I think not only climate change, but we need to be, call it what you want. It is climate change, but it is also coupled with some other problems. So.
Thank you. When is the best time to plant a tree? The best time to 20 years ago. The next best time is to plant it today. Okay, exactly, 20 years ago. So it's catch-up time. It's very common, I think, on City Council, we worry about the catastrophic sort of events, historically the things we've seen, fire and flood. The slow death of the environment is, I think, a huge concern. If you walk along Fountain Creek, you'll see days when you see it gets silted up or the water is low, and you worry about that. What can we do? Well, we've planted trees, and we will continue to plant trees. We'll try to take care of, soil conservation, water, use our resources as wisely as we can. Going forward, and I have to give credit to Roy Cheney, the Deputy City Administrator and Bill, our engineer. They're looking at an electric trolley that we could use in place of a diesel bus for the shuttle. So that would be charming downtown. We'd be using rechargeable electricity. I think that we're really early on in finding technology that works. It's I know City of Colorado Springs they've begun to experiment with electric rechargeable buses. They're 10 feet longer than what we typically have here, so it's not well suited to the incline. Taking incliners and cog people up narrow twisty Ruxton Avenue. But we're thinking about that. Well, we need to keep thinking. We need to be really careful, I think, with the environment. Watch out for it. Yesterday we had the first Indigenous Peoples Day, and twice I think they mentioned the thing. You need to take care of your mother. Your mother is the earth.
Thank you. I'd like to interject here before the next question, say that we're having some issues with the sound fuzzing a little bit, and this is for me too, of trying to stay a little further away from the microphone to hopefully improve the quality of the video as well. Another question for all three. What will you do? Wait a minute, sorry, wrong question. What should the city do to increase the use of solar within the city for business, residential, and government? Again, any order you want.
A few years ago, we did subscribe to some solar gardens, and I believe we have a whole city on using that resource for the source of power, and we had a few times where citizens could subscribe to that too, and that's a great first step. As we revisit our development, our zoning codes, which we're in the process of doing right now, there are a lot of opportunities to incorporate solar requirements, or maybe not requirements, but have incentives. Right now, most of the incentives we have are you can build bigger and more massive things if you do a few little tweaks to your plan. And I think we could be much more aggressive in making incentives to encourage people to incorporate solar. Actually a more, this is maybe on a 10-year horizon, but it's, the car manufacturers are clearly talking about going away from carbon type vehicles. They'll be electric, and if you look at especially in some of the historic areas, it's going to be an interesting challenge for people to have, charging at their home. Like I can just park in my garage and charge up whatever I want, but if you don't have a garage, you can't do that. So we have to really think about how are we going to get that infrastructure to provide the capability for anybody to charge their electric vehicles. And as we're doing things like we're still working in development in the URA, we're talking about what's going to happen in other parts of town, and as we're doing the upgrade of the infrastructure, we should really think about how can we add that capability for charging throughout our town.
This is an issue I almost would have tried to tackle when we got the dispensaries here in town. I would have tried to allocate some of that tax revenue money to solar energy. I think it's one of those things that if we need to do it, that's for sure. It would tackle so many issues that we would face here in Manitou, climate change one, reliance on Colorado Springs being another. I think it's something that it would be a slow burn. You'd give a percentage, okay, let's try to have 3% solar annually for the next 20 years, and then in 20 years we can be 60% solar. I think going forward, certainly we should try to allocate some resources to this, because the only people it's going to benefit is us. And I think not only that, but we need to be aware that as Manitou citizens, we pay higher per capita electricity bills, and I think we need to be aware that it's because of our reliance on Colorado Springs. So not only is the issue going to not only is it going to address that reliance on Colorado Springs, but it is going to help us with the climate change. Now, Colorado Springs Manitou Springs being in the valley, there are some setbacks with solar. I know I studied physics for a while, so this was actually one thing I really looked diligently into. And I know there are some setbacks with solar. We do have the hydroelectric plant there, and there is potentiality to get more wattage from hydroelectric as well. That's neither here nor there, but certainly we do need to look into solar, because that is the future, and it'll be good. And also, that being said, is we have these shuttles running year round. I can't tell you how crazy it drives me in the middle of January when I see that shuttle running empty, just burning that diesel fuel, and it is something that we need to fix as well.
Great, thank you. Relative to solar, it seems to me like the quickest solution, things that we can implement are would be the solar gardens. And I know some of you have experimented with this. You buy credits, you really kind of have a membership or a share in a location that's off-site, someplace else, maybe out in eastern Colorado, where they've got lots of space and they can put out the solar panels and it doesn't mess with the viewscape. I think this is an interesting problem. I think it's important, but it's a challenge in Manitou that's quintessentially Manitou. It's where we have values that we consider very highly, and they're in opposition. For instance, we love our viewscape. Do we really want solar panels up there? We love our historic buildings. Do they make solar panels that look good on historic buildings? I live in the historic district, and one time I thought about putting solar panels on my house, and I decided it really would mar the neighborhood. It wouldn't look good. So I struggle with that. I think it is important. And we'll give an attaboy to the city. In terms of alternative energy, we've installed a hydroelectric generator at the water filtration plant. So as the water's making its way down to be purified, to basically make it to our sinks and bathtubs, we're using that energy to pay for a lot of the electrical overhead on the filtration plant. And that was envisioned several years. Actually, I think it goes back clear to Bill Kerner. So many years ago, the idea came up. It finally got implemented, and I think we still need to get some certification on that. But there's another alternative energy thing that we've got. And certainly, I understand that some of the newer building materials are going to be better suited to retrofitting on historic structures. So I think we look into that. We might have some solutions that blend in very well with the community. So we keep our eyes open there.
Okay, next we're going to take a little different tack, and if you've been to any of our previous forums in other years, you may remember this, and that's having each candidate ask a question of their opponents. I could say here, since we have three of you, you could ask it of the other two or of one in particular, but this is your chance to ask the question. And again, the same rules apply on answers as well. John Graham first.
Okay, I guess I'll put my first question to Alan Delwich. Alan, you've been real diligent in attending council meetings in person now that we're doing it in person, and certainly on Zoom when throughout the real difficult times of COVID. What would you have done differently than I would? What's the most important thing?
I guess, the primary thing I would have done is I would have probably opted for longer meetings and opened it up a little bit more for interaction with the people who come to meetings, because over the years going to meetings, typically there will be a dozen people who are in the audience, and like like if it's a work session, I can think of previous terms, maybe several years ago, where I'd be sitting in the audience and I'd have a puzzled look on my face, and the mayor would say, "Alan, what's on your mind? What do you think about this?" And we sort of lost that, and that's probably something that I would want to bring back, is that interaction. And yeah, I know none of us want to be at a meeting from 6 to 11, but sometimes that's the way to really get that participation. So that's probably the primary thing I'd change, is I'd have more interaction with the people who come to meetings.
Tyler, Grace? Yeah, or did you have another?
No, same question for Tyler.
Okay.
What would you do differently than what I've done?
Coming here tonight, I wanted to be very careful not to criticize. I'm not here to shake any branches. I really don't want to put anyone down. What I have thought is the mistake of the past 2 years would be probably creating solutions to problems that have only created more problems. And I think that, in a sense, one example is the incline. I don't like how we yielded our position on the incline. I don't like how we probably lost, 4 to 5 businesses, and that's a complex situation, because we can blame COVID, we can blame the roads. It's hard to say in retrospect what one would have done, but I think a lot of the past 2 years have been further yielding territory to Colorado Springs and to Broadmoor, and yeah.
While you've got the microphone, then, what question do you have for either or both of the other two?
I'll direct a question at John Graham, and that would be, what, over the past 2 years, what has been the most unforeseen, challenging aspect of being mayor?
Well, I hadn't scheduled COVID, so that was a huge factor. That pretty well disrupted us. And I mean, I can't minimize how crushing that felt in the first month, from about middle of March to the middle of April. We were really concerned that we were going to have revenue basically just turn off, and we were going to start turning off city services. That was chilling. We thought we ran a real risk of losing people to COVID. I mean, we at least have them out sick. I mean, the idea of death it's still pretty hard to take, but God, that was crushing. That threw everything, really threw a wrench in the monkey works. We cut back on spending money as much as we could. We didn't know how long it would last. And in fact, it turned out that after things sort of lightened up, we had all this pent-up demand. We had a lot of tourism. So right now we're sitting at about 40% of our annual revenues. We've got that in our checking account. Normally we try to keep 2 months or about 17% on hand. So we're pretty flush right now. We're going to be able to get aggressive on some things, so that's good. But as nice as it may seem, COVID wasn't worth it. So that was probably the worst thing.
Alan Millage, you have a question?
Could I have 2 questions, one for each?
Sure.
First for John. 2 years ago when we were up here, we both were saying, we got to get this incline under control, and I have to thank you for being part of the solution. But one of the things we talked about back then was maybe charging a fee for use of the incline. That hasn't happened. Would you consider that in the future?
Yes, I absolutely would, and that was I'm glad you asked that question. 2 years ago, both Alan and I made reference to Hanging Lake over by Glenwood Springs, and how that was such a model that maybe we could embrace and learn from. They're basically, you pay a fee, You ride a bus from Glenwood Springs up to Hanging Lake, you hike, and you get back. So they can really manage the number of people who are there, and by charging a fee, that pays for the upkeep of the trail, providing facilities like restrooms, and providing the shuttle. So it was a good way to manage things. That's still something I think we can embrace. Now, this is not a simple jurisdiction because basically Colorado Springs owns the incline, we own the access to it's in our city limits. So it's taken a lot of diplomacy and interaction with the city of Colorado Springs. I think we've made progress there. I think that John Southers understands. I think they're paying now about $120,000 a year to pay for the attendance at the bottom. And if you saw the newspaper article yesterday, John is arguing for more money for parks and recreation programs. He feels that they need that money. So I think they would entertain the idea of looking at monetizing the incline to some extent. I think he'd be willing to talk about it. I can't speak for him.
And Tyler, I just have one question. You know, you've displayed that you're very thoughtful. You've thought about a lot of issues in Manitou, and I'm just curious, you know, because back in August when I decided to run, I pulled the voter database, and you weren't even registered at that time, and I'm curious why.
Man, I wish I'd gotten that incline question.
I wish you had too.
And it's, so he is correct that there is no question I have not been a registered voter prior. You know, and I understand that is a big critique among some of you and the lack of involvement. And my defense of that would be, you know, I'm 28 now, so I turned 18 in 2011. I've been through the 2012, the 2016, now the 2020 elections for president. I have never been, you know, growing up I had an extreme faith that the most competent people were running the show, and the older I got, the more faith I've lost in this, you know, and I really have no regrets with not voting. Also, I'm not affiliated with either the Republican or the Democratic Party. I think both groups, you know, obviously most of you are, but I think at this point on a federal level, both groups are pretty wretched, and I think we as a community, as a people in whole, have really been led astray by these people. You know, you have these great people in the Senate and the Congress, top of their class. You know, they look so good on paper, but then they get up there in front of you and they can hardly articulate a proper solution to anything, you know. And it's really, I think that's really why I'm here too, is sort of a frustration with the lack of competency. And that certainly isn't directed at the gentleman to the left and right of me, but I'm talking in general. And I think that is why I'm here to get involved. I think I can no longer be complacent, and I think that we really need to, you know, we cannot allow what is going on to continue at any level, and I think that's why I'm here. We're going to start local, and we're going to do what we can to go all the way to the top, and not me personally, but we need to get involved to the top.
Thank you. Good questions. We're going to wrap up this portion with 1 minute closing statements, and we will go in the order that we started with Alan first. 1 minute.
Okay, I'd like to express my thanks to the Pikes Peak Bulletin, the League of Women Voters, and to all of you who came out tonight to participate in our democracy. It's been lots of fun and very enlightening. So I'll just repeat one more time. In my opinion, our primary mission should be to maintain the character and livability of our community. We must attend to the needs of our residential neighborhoods. We need to have smart development that preserves our history and culture. And we have to come up with solutions to our traffic and parking and congestion. And finally, and most importantly, we have to come together to address the challenges of climate change. Thank you.
I think ultimately whoever wins mayor, we're just one person, and obviously the city council and all of you are ultimately the deciders for this town. That being said, going forward, I think as mayor, my duty would be to attempt to break that interlock between us and Colorado Springs as much as possible, and to give that confidence in city council and the community to run our town. You know, we're only in control of our own destiny as much as we have that liberty to do so. So every interlock between us and Colorado Springs takes away some liberty between the citizens of Manitou to make their own choices. And I also just want to thank you all for coming out. This is my first public speaking event, and I almost shit my pants, but I'm very happy. I'm very happy just to be involved. I apologize. I didn't realize I wasn't here. But it really has been an honor to be with you, and I thank you so much for being patient with me. I probably didn't articulate my sentences and ideas as well as I could have, but I promise this is just a learning experience and we're going to get there. So thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to thank the Bulletin for sponsoring this event. I appreciate your participation. I mean, this is the most people I've seen in a long time. It's great to see you involved and interested. I think, you know, just in summing up, addressing the quality of life for the residents while still making this a hospitable place for visitors, that's an important challenge. I think we want to keep doing that. I think Manitou always wants to embrace its quirkiness, its uniqueness, its personality. That goes way beyond city council. If city council can keep the lights on, the water running, the toilets flushing, and the roads passable, I think that's our essential job in public safety. Really, the community of Manitou is far more than just city council or the mayor's job. Let's live large. Let's be bold. Let's be quirky, and let's celebrate it.
Thank you. The candidates for mayor can go sit in the audience now if you wish, or you can stay where you are. Up to you. Next, we're going to move into City Council to review. One person, Natalie Johnson, is running to represent Ward 1. She was appointed to the seat after the previous councilor in Ward 1, Susan Walbrook, stepped down in April. In Ward 2, Nancy Fortune is unopposed, seeking a second term. Besides being the incumbent, she also has served as Mayor Pro Tem. And two candidates, Robert Todd and Michelle Wetterholt, are running to represent Ward 3. City council members serve 4 years. For those needing a little refresher, Manitou's council is comprised of the mayor, 3 representatives of the city's 3 wards, and 3 others serving at large. This is the year for the ward representatives. In 2 years from now, the at-large seats will be up. We're going to have the unopposed candidates speak first. We're only going to have questions for the race for Ward 3. First, Ward 1, Natalie Johnson, your statement.
When I moved to Manitou Springs, I did not know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Taking a chance, I opened a bookstore. Taking a chance, I became the director of the Manitou Art Center. Taking a chance, I applied for the City of Manitou Springs to be recognized as a state-certified creative district. Taking a chance, I supported the match ballot measure to fund art and culture in Manitou Springs. Taking a chance, I ran for school board and later applied to complete Susan Wolbrook's council seat. I love living in a community where people are encouraged to take chances. Thank you for supporting the ups and downs that these chances created for me. I cannot imagine living in a better community. I've lived here for 19 years. I have lived in all 3 wards in Manitou Springs, including Ruxton, downtown Manitou Avenue, Crystal Hills, and now the eastern edge of Ward 1 for the last 5 years. I've owned and rented multiple properties, commercial and residential. I've worked in Manitou Springs at the Stagecoach in Blue Vervain, own my own business in downtown Manitou Springs, and have been the director of several nonprofits in Manitou Springs, and a long-time volunteer with the school district, and currently on the Board of Education. I've served on everything from the Chamber Board to the Parking Board to the Urban Renewal Authority Board. This varied Manitou Springs life has led me to this moment. I look forward to more chances and to encouraging others to take chances too. Thank you for all of the opportunities that living in a small town and a passionate town creates for each of us. Here's to more chances and more experiences. Thank you all for caring and coming out tonight.
Next, Nancy Fortune.
Thank you. It took me months of reflection to decide if I would run again for City Council as a Ward 2 representative. The workload is significant, as is the pressure and responsibility of making decisions that can have huge implications for the future of Manitou Springs, a community that has come to mean more to me than I ever would have anticipated when I moved here 12 years ago. So why did I decide to run again? In no small part, it was because so many people encouraged me to. Even more influential in my decision was a strong sense of obligation and service to our community. I feel that after over a year of COVID, our council, along with our city staff, are clicking more as a team. And as a team, we are getting so much more done. I have long believed that stability is a critical element for a high-functioning team, and as the longest-serving council member, I believe I can contribute to that stability. As far as my platform goes, I will continue to advocate for mobility solutions to our congestion and parking issues. I am particularly supportive of non-motorized options as well as public transportation. I will continue to use as my blueprint for governance the city charter, ordinances, and our community-vetted plans such as Plan Manitou. I am also very interested in community-generated recommendations and the tremendous and generous volunteerism by so many in our community, particularly our boards and commissions. Our community participation here in Manitou is remarkable. I'm very concerned about the status. I too am very concerned about the status of our city's infrastructure, and am pleased that we seem to have the right staff in place to actually plan for maintenance rather than just to reacting to issues as they arise. However, infrastructure is not the secret ingredient that makes Manitou such a special place to live and work. So I am also very interested in preserving and enhancing whatever that ephemeral quality is. I can't pinpoint it exactly, but I've concluded that in great part it comes from our values as a city. Encouraging creativity and diversity, respecting our heritage and history, preserving and maintaining our environment to include parks and outdoor spaces, and most importantly, being a welcoming and open-minded city. I look forward to serving this wonderful community for another 4 years. Thank you.
Now we move to the Ward 3 contested race. First statement from Robert Todd.
Good evening, neighbors and friends. It's great to be in your company again. Again, I am Bob Todd. I'm running for the Ward 3 Council seat. My motivation in running for the Ward 3 Council seat is to pay it forward so others in the future might enjoy living, playing, and working in our incredible city, just as my family has for the last 15 years. I bring to the city 35 years of executive experience in revitalizing organizations, finance, operations, and engineering. I was appointed to council in 2016 and elected to a 4-year term in 2018. My past contributions to the cities are detailed on the green flyer sitting in the lobby. Working with the mayor and council, 3 items I would like to see brought to fruition are revitalization of our neighborhoods without increasing sales of property taxes. Secondly, a deep review of city finances to assure we are on a path and have scenarios for long-term financial sustainability. Lastly, implementation of best practices for governance throughout our city government. A few neighborhood specifics. Strong cities are comprised of strong neighborhoods. Let's make our streetscapes and streets as inviting as our homes. How? Increase the annual budget for street upgrade and repair from approximately $500,000 to $1.5 million a year. These funds could come from declaring 20% of all marijuana tax collected to be earmarked for our streets, or reserving 60% of our parking revenue to the cause, or simply devoting 25% of the city's general reserves for the same. Further, we piggyback on the renewed focus to maintain our parks, excuse me for having a mask on, and spaces in a climate-aware environment approach, and apply the same to all city trees and plantings that have gone fallow in our neighborhoods. As to city finances, two recommendations for you to consider are running the city's general fund of approximately $13 million annually on a balanced basis. I have other ideas. Council enacted a code of conduct for our city council members this year and boards and commissions. I would like to see that move to review by our own local ethics commission. All things are headed in the right direction, but it's time for us to review and update our city charter and city code elements that refer to governance. I'm a strong advocate for that.
And Michelle Weatherholt.
Hi, I'm Michelle Weatherholt. I'm running for City Council Ward 3. I'm here to represent you with and approaching our major challenge. Ward 3 has, we have the traffic, congestion, and parking, and we've dealt with this for a lot of years. And I may not be able to find a solution in the next 4 years, but I thought about it, and people have to make a reservation for the COG, and they have to make a reservation for the incline. Why not make a reservation for parking while they're at it? So hypothetically, let's say a person has a 1 o'clock reservation for the incline. They catch the shuttle at 12:40. They're parking at 12:30, Hiawatha Gardens, spot number 7. I just want to say that yes, I was very nervous, and when I first went to the informational meeting not a few weeks ago, it's more like 6 weeks ago, I thought I was going to run next year. But then I was like, people told me, well, you haven't sat on a committee, you haven't been on a board. I started running in 2013, and I went straight from a half marathon to a 50-miler. So here I am, committed, motivated. I'm here to represent the city, and I'm here to represent the citizens of Ward 3. And while I'm on council, I'll be listening to each and every one of you. Thank you.
A couple of quick questions for both of you. And the first question will start with Bob Todd, but to be followed by Michelle. This will sound familiar. What experience and skills do you bring that separate you from your opponent?
I would suggest 2 categories. One is business experience, revitalizing organizations, careers in finance, careers in engineering, and career in operations. Secondly, I would put down being on city council. During the time I was on city council, I had the opportunity to save the city both hard dollars and preserve historic structures through my engineering and financial skills. I also had the opportunity to effectively debate the $8 million bond issue. The critical Achilles heel in that was the city at the time did not have a capital plan. It did not make sense to burden the taxpayers with an $8 million bond issue. So stepping out boldly on these issues, I believe I have changed the course of the city. I believe we have come to a much stronger, efficient, and effective government. I put huge credit on the fact of the sweat of the council that searched 18 months for a city administrator. Our city administration today stands head and shoulders above and is only equal to the best city administrations in the state. Huge progress in that regard. I also see that we set the ground rules for a council that's operated much more efficiently and effectively. It's operated typically 3 hours with hard decision making, a few times going over the 3 hours, and you know what? As all private councils learn, when you get into that 4th hour work and 5th hour work, you don't make good decisions. And I'm very pleased to see that our council has taken that seriously. Thank you.
The experience that I bring to city council is I was with Safeway for 20 years in Tucson, and I've been with Comcast for almost 5 years. And the thing that I bring the most is the networking, bringing people together, the community, all of the above. Last year during COVID, I met some people at Red Dog who have become my friends and mentors, and I can't thank them enough. They are right here with me tonight. And I just want to say that it's my personality. I love people, I enjoy people, and yes, I do have a lot to learn, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm dedicated and motivated.
Okay, next question first for Michelle, and then talk about an issue specific to Ward 3 and how you would address it.
In my opening statement, traffic congestion and parking. I live downtown on Canyon Avenue, and yes, in the summertime, it's crazy. It's crazy to think that, how are we gonna get out of here if there was a fire? You have X amount of cars. I looked at the numbers just for the incline alone, 65 people per half hour. And let's say hypothetically, they bring one other person, so that's 2 people per car. In the course of one day, 800 cars are coming to Manitou just for the incline. That does not include the people that are utilizing the Cog Railway. It doesn't include the people that are shopping or eating or coming here to go hiking. So traffic congestion and parking is one of the major things that Ward 3 has to contend with.
I certainly concur with Michelle about this is the major issue in Ward 3. With respect to that, I suggest a couple of things. One, that every bit of street improvement that we do it with a vision that faces the reality that the Ruxton Corridor, Pilot Knob, these congested areas in the long term have to become resident only or local businesses located in those zones employees. And we need to find alternative ways to get people up there. Secondly, I would like to suggest that Manitou Avenue, the city advanced talks with CDOT to put that under our control. Why? Because Manitou Avenue is a great thoroughfare that in the summertime could be closed, for example, 2 Wednesdays of the week, and invite everybody from Manitou Springs to come down and enjoy our downtown area. This wouldn't be built for tourists, this would be built for residents. It's all about strengthening our neighborhoods, strengthening our connectivity, embellishing our culture and our values, and neighbor-to-neighbor dialogue down in the primary area where we can all congregate, Manitou Avenue. In addition, I do want to mention that I have been researching the possibilities and alternate to Ruxton Avenue, which basically would be a right-of-way coming off the West End roundabout and transversing up behind all the residential areas. These properties are owned by 2 individuals who are not looking to develop them with houses and things of this nature. This would be an opportunity for the city. Thank you.
Okay. Next, I have a question specifically to Michelle Weatherhall. What are your views on electric bikes and scooters in Manitou and how to control them and where to allow people to ride them?
I am all for alternative modes of transportation. As far as storing them, possibly Hiawatha Gardens. I know right now Hiawatha Gardens, there's a lot of things that we need to bring to the table as we don't have a current solution for them. I've gone on a lot of bike rides, and I like the fact that we can jump on. You'll forgive me, I'm very nervous. So yes, you can jump on Pikes Peak, and then get downtown to Colorado Springs. And with city funds, I think we could improve some more bike paths. I think it would be great to have the hub for, to eventually hopefully buy where Chase Bank is and make that the hub, and then make the area right in front of Sunwater Spa to just, e-bikes and regular bikes and no cars. Thank you.
Bob, I'll let you respond to that if you'd like.
Well, number one, I have an office in Old Colorado City, and I'm really surprised by how quickly Colorado Springs got off guard regarding motorized scooters. Go down Colorado Avenue and you'll see rafts of them just sitting everywhere, right, almost literally in the middle of crosswalks. I'm very pleased that our council has put a moratorium on that activity until it can be further studied. Regarding the bicycles, just to echo Michelle, I'm excited about the ability to be able to go from Manitou Springs down to American Beautiful Park in downtown Colorado Springs, the Olympic Museum, and the whole network of transportation that goes from there. Strongly support that. And myself, I've been researching electric bikes because I don't think I'm up to going up Cave Avenue by pedals. And Michelle and I found out over the past weekend, nor are moving trucks, and they can actually bail out on you, which they did.
Okay, the next question is for Bob. Can you explain what happened in more detail when you resigned in your first term? The rumor mill did not look good.
I'd like to suggest I resigned my second term, and that's fine.
Sorry.
No problem. I was appointed to council for 2 years, and then I ran unopposed for a 4-year term. Very simply, age catches up with all of us. Inherited health conditions, which you're able to skate through, sometimes will creep up. In my particular case, I had a severe heart leakage in the primary valve, the aorta valve. I was told convincingly that I had to go into shelter and isolate myself on Friday, February 13th. And within 30 days, I'd found an Airbnb, 10-minute walk from the house, and I lived there literally, none of you saw me, until the summer of 2020. That particular condition, thanks to the great medical help that's in this area, I've been able to reduce to a mild to moderate condition, and I'm back at my same level of activity that I was in when I first went on council. Today I have a part-time consulting business. I work half-time. I devote a lot more time to exercise and good health practices and sleep.
Okay, next, as we did with the mayoral candidates, we'll let each one of you ask the other a question. Michelle, you go first.
I don't have any questions for you guys. Thank you.
Well, actually, Michelle, I have no questions of you either, but I wanted to provide you with the opportunity to say anything that you felt you'd like to say that you didn't have a chance to.
I don't think I have any other additional comments. Thank you.
Well, given that, I think I'll throw in one more audience question. This is for both of you. Everyone complains about the traffic downtown. Why has city council failed? You all haven't been on council lately, so you can address this if you want, or you can do the rest of the question. Why does council fail to promote a west exit out of downtown and out of Manitou via Serpentine Drive or the highway?
Serpentine Drive, I don't think that's a great idea for all of us to exit. living downtown Manitou, my main exit is Washington Avenue. And when that was closed last week, that was a little challenging, but we all choose to live in Manitou. And I've talked to a lot of you, and a lot of you have lived over in Manitou for over 20 years. And why? Because it's quirky. I don't mean to use the same word that John Graham used, but it's fun. I grew up in Colorado Springs. I was born in the Philippines, and being a trail runner, we're spoiled. We have the trails right in our backyard. And, we have 3 main entrances off the highway into Manitou. And then we also have Colorado Boulevard turning into Manitou Avenue. It's tough. It's tough in the summertime, but yet we do need those tourist dollars, those tax dollars to keep us moving and growing. Thank you.
Well, on this, Michelle and I definitely differ. What I would like to suggest is that city council and city staff have a very nice exit in process to leave the town west through Serpentine Drive and back to the highway. That particular entrance and exit is traffic lighted. Washington Avenue, my personal belief is, number one, the ability to make a left-hand turn when you go up Washington Avenue is suicide. And it's double suicide if you're a tourist. Secondly, if you use Washington Avenue to dip down into Manitou coming from Colorado Springs, that's another suicide maneuver. So Washington Avenue is a death trap, and we ought to be looking at pressing CDOT to find a better way to manage traffic there. The last thing I'll share, and I hate to do this with this crowd, is if you really want to get into Manitou, what you need to do is get off Highway 24 at 26th Street and zoom up Colorado Avenue, go through the URA zone, and come in that way, and you also have your choice to come in El Paso. It's a dream every time you see Highway 24 backed up. But don't pass that on beyond this crowd.
Now we'll have wrap-up statements of 1 minute each for each of the 2. Michelle, you go first. 1 minute.
As I was listening to John Graham and Alan Dulwich, the other thing I was thinking about was zoning. We have Holiday Inn going in down there, right there by the 2 pot shops. And so you guys already know how I'm going to vote in January. And we need to work on our zoning laws. We don't need another Holiday Inn. We want to keep what we currently have. We want to keep those cute, quirky motels. And that's where I stand on that.
To wrap up, I would like to personally thank Rhonda Van Pelt for really pulling this event off today. It was very difficult to do with the COVID restrictions, with being able to do certainty, being able to communicate to the candidates. Superb job, and Ralph, also thank you for your moderation, and the Pikes Peak Bulletin for its sponsorship, as well as the League of Voters. This evening may not have fielded all your questions. To augment your perspective, please access my website, bobtoddforcitycouncil.com, for the latest information. And lastly, if you do live in Ward 3, registration information is posted on my website for Zoom town halls I will be holding the next 2 Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. Go on the website and register to attend. Your vote for me will ensure a voice of continuity will be on council to press hard on neighborhood improvement, financial sustainability, and good governance. As citizens and business owners can rely on the same commitment to attention that they were used to in the past when unique situations developed that were hard to resolve and they came to me for solutions. I thank you in advance for your vote and support as a returning council member. Thank you.
Thank you both. And now all of you except for Natalie can go out and relax. Natalie has to stay. We're actually going to move quickly through the school board because the two candidates remaining up here in front of you are running unopposed. Both of them have already served a term, and that would be Natalie Johnson and Tina Vidovich. Tina Vidovich is the current board president of the District 11 School Board. Natalie Johnson is the vice chair, so as you can tell, there will be continuity. We've asked them to give 2-minute statements, and we will not have questions because we will be doing questions on the bond issue following up. Is that me? But we've also asked these two, in making their statements, to refrain from talking about the bond issue, since we will be going right into that. So, first, Natalie.
Last time I sat up here next to Tina Vidovich, I was running against her and Jack. Now it feels like I'm sitting up here with my team. Jack, Tina, Gus, and Gary. We all work together to help Manitou Springs School District 14 as the Board of Education. We might not always agree, but we listen to one another and work through the tough issues. I'm looking forward to another 4 years with this great group of leaders. My school story is different from others because I am a childless taxpayer. It started when kids would come to my bookstore and invite me to their events, theater productions, soccer games, musical performances. Then I became a science fair judge and supported Dad's Dudes and Donuts and Mom's Mentors and Muffins through my bookstore. After that, I joined Partners for Healthy Choices and the District Accountability Committee, and eventually the Career Technical Education Committee, and finally the school board in 2017. While I will never know all of the teachers' names and where all the bathrooms are located, it takes having kids to know those things, I feel connected and dedicated to Manitou Springs School District 14. I look forward to sitting next to Tina, Jack, and the rest of my Board of Education crew for another 4 years. This is a divisive time for many school boards across the country. I would like to thank this community for continuing to support all of us. We work better together, and more importantly, our kids work and learn better together. Thank you.
So what I found out when we were running together 4 years ago is Natalie's really kind of the darling of Manitou. And besides, do you still have that pink bike? Okay. So I don't have all that. I kind of get up in the morning, go to work all day, and come back to Manitou. So a little about me. If you know me already, or even if you don't, I've spent over 30 years in public education as a teacher and administrator, and I'm still in the business. My son graduated from Manitou in 2018. We have been Manitou residents since, and have been Manitou residents since 2003. I've been on school accountability committees, district accountabilities. I've been on 2 superintendent search committees for the district. And the last 2 years have served as board president, but have been on the board now for 4.5 years. And I want to continue working on the board, and will do so for the next 4 years, for stability and continuity of the work that we've already been engaged in. As Natalie talked about, school boards right now are under fire. We are under pressure from political organizations, people who want to start a political foothold, from just a lot of community members. Not necessarily this community, I'm talking nationwide. You guys have been amazing this evening, so I'm preaching to the choir in some respects. But we have had school board superintendents threatened, personalize their homes physically, as well as their jobs and well-being, all in the sake of people trying to be right. And so I would say this, is instead of trying to be right, we need to focus on, an urge for all of us to step back from ways of thinking that cause us to believe that we are so very right from the other person, that the other person is somehow very wrong due to self-serving ambitions or some inherent maliciousness. I ask everybody to help each other step into a place that appreciates and accepts the cognitive tension of disagreement with others and within ourselves. Practice pausing, asking questions to gain clarity and insights. before sending an email, posting a reply, etc. We've had staff, including our superintendent, come under really personal attack rather than just a discussion of issues during this time. So we can disagree about issues without being disagreeable. Thank you for being such wonderful models this evening and a wonderful audience. We appreciate your participation and support.
And I think we can all agree that maybe there's a reason why these two are unopposed. We're in pretty good hands. And now you can both go if you wish. Not go away, but go to the audience. Now we move on to the District 14 bond issue. We're going to have two people come to the podium to speak for and against issue 4C. They're going to be given 4 minutes each, and then we will have some questions for them, and I do have audience questions as well. We didn't go through every detail of this, but I would say that if the two of you can stay up here after you speak, then it'll make the questions go more easily. The first speaking in support of 4C, Dan Stewart. Whichever you prefer.
I'll stand because I heard those microphones. Well, I'm really excited to be able to speak in favor of the children of our school district. Our school buildings average about 50 years old. Older buildings like ours were constructed and built with materials such as lead paint and asbestos. The elimination of hazardous materials through upgrades and renovations make buildings safer, healthier, and more environmentally friendly. They were also built with 20th century learning in mind. Kids today clearly learn differently, and in today's world are stressed very differently. Our schools today not only teach kids, they function as hospitals, counseling centers, crisis control centers, food pantries, even clothing pantries. We employ nurses, mental health counselors, and security officers. In some cases, we give those people closets for their offices. The ballot proposal includes new and remodeled facilities at the high school, middle school, and Silk building. It includes new roofs for our 2 elementary schools. Importantly, it also includes safety and security measures, which all of our schools currently lack. If none of that is persuasive, here's a very practical reason to vote yes on 4C. A yes vote produces a better return on investment now than if we have to do this again in the future. Interest rates are at an all-time low. It's a great time to borrow money. And there's a $9 million BEST grant awarded to the district if this issue passes, which stretches our taxpayer dollars even farther. The flip side of that is that if this ballot question fails, the problems don't go away. The school board would have to try again, but their purchasing power will be greatly diminished. Not only would they be without the BEST grant, but we know interest rates are going up. If they increase just 2 percentage points, a similar loan would cost about $8 million more, and with construction costs rising about 10% or more a year in recent years, we're going to lose additional purchasing power. So if 4C fails, Jack may actually get half his wish. The board might have to come back with a $29 million proposal, but unfortunately, it would cost us all just as much as today's $43 million proposal. That's a much poorer return on investment. The school district spent 9 months preparing a master plan. It examined all 5 buildings in great detail, assessing teaching environments, safety, energy efficiency, utility needs, building integrity, hazardous substances, traffic, and even parking. Our schools rank much lower in these categories than the state average for other schools. What is proposed is a comprehensive package that's exciting, thoughtful, and inclusive. It addresses ADA compliance so all our children can participate. The Board of Education considered multiple bond packages over several months. 4C doesn't include everything that's needed, but it does address those physical needs and also addresses educational upgrades for the children, which the lower bond packages they considered did not address. Jack acknowledged in a letter to the editor last week that there are needs in our schools. He mentioned code compliance in roofing and heating and ventilation, air conditioning, security, athletic fields. He told the school board that he was in favor of a $29 million bond. Unfortunately, that $29 million proposal doesn't cover all the needs he mentioned in his letter, and it doesn't get to educational upgrades. Those educational elements, which are included in 4C, but were not in the lower proposals, include designated and appropriate spaces for speech language pathologists, school psychologists, special education, career technical education, which is vocational learning for those kids unlikely to go to college, robotics program enhancements, restrooms for preschool students, auditorium preservation and restoration, classroom improvements, an ADA elevator at the elementary school, as well as turfing the athletic fields and elementary playgrounds, and much more. Thanks very much.
And now speaking against 4C, Jack Sharon.
I always love the opportunity to take the mask off. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all this evening on this very important issue. I have to disclose my bias in that I've got kids in the district. Still, I want them, their friends, all the students, the staff, the faculty, everyone to excel and flourish in Manitou. So that's my bias. I'm speaking tonight as a private citizen, as a physician that spent a lot of years in school, as a taxpayer, as well as a dad. I'm 100% invested, and the reason I'm up here is just to make sure that the taxpayers have all the information that they need so that they can make a solid, informed decision, understanding not the benefits, which are multiple, but also the cost. Nobody I know buys anything without knowing the cost. The Manitou Springs School District website has done an excellent job with lots of good information on the benefits of the bond, but have downplayed what I think is a significant issue if you're making a purchase is affordability. Neither the Excel bond calculator nor the example of $13 per month increase for $100,000 really tells the whole issue, as that only applies to the increase that's due to the bond. There's other increases in taxes that include the fact that property values are up 14 to 15% in our district, and then the bond adds up to that. Those things make our district, which I haven't seen publicized anywhere currently, is number 10 out of 178 districts in the state for total cost on the mill levy. If this bond is passed, we'll be the third highest in the state of Colorado and well above any of the other districts in the Pikes Peak region. The real question is how, if passed, this bond will affect the average home or business owner. The average house in Manitou Springs is now $409,000, and that's according to the county assessor. And I've got data if anybody needs to see it. That price for their taxes between 2021 and 2022 will go up $700 per year. Again, that's the average cost, which is about a 50% increase. The average commercial property owner with a $416,000 business, which again is the average, their taxes will go from about $5,400 up to $8,300, which is $2,900 difference, or 55%. The bond capacity Mr. Stewart mentioned earlier initially was $26.6 million. In fact, that's the number that the district used to obtain the BEST grant. And I've also got that if anybody wants to see it. Eventually, it ended up getting to a $43 million bond, which is totally legal from the state standpoint, but the question really is, can the local taxpayers afford it? All we needed to do to get the BEST grant funding of $9 million, which is very important, is a $17 million match, actually a little bit less. That total $26 million would have covered a lot, if not most of the true needs. The number of students that come from within the district has been decreasing every year for the last 10 years and now represents less than 50% of the student body. The total student body is somewhere around $1,400 or a little less than that, although I've not seen or heard the most recent numbers for this year's count date. The Manitou School District voters and taxpayers have been incredibly generous, and they have, over if this $43 million bond is passed, they'll see a 46% increase in their total mill levy over the last 7 years. At the same time, the district enrollment has gone down 8%. The bond will not do anything for staff or other teacher salaries. Needs versus wants is really the question. There's no doubt we have lots of needs, and I've mentioned those before, as did Mr. Stewart. The question is, do we actually need a new middle school? Do we need a glass-covered bridge that also serves as a media center that goes between the proposed new middle school and the high school? I want to be clear that voting against 4C is not a vote against children, students, or education, but rather a common sense and fiscally responsible approach for our residential and commercial property owners as we appropriately prioritize the needs of the school district and the students. Thank you.
Okay, first a couple of questions for both of you and then a couple that are separate. First, please address any misconceptions that you've encountered about the bond issue. This is your chance to impact public understanding, starting with Dan Stewart.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well,
2 minutes, by the way, on these answers.
2 minutes. 2 minutes on these
Thank
answers.
you. One thing that I've heard is something that Jack said. Some people conflate the school bond issue with property assessment increases. And while both of them do increase our taxes, the school board has no control over property tax or property assessments. So while the bond does increase property taxes, the average increase from the new bond is about half of what Jack is suggesting it is. The other increase has to do with the removal of the old bond from in 2019 or 20, and also property tax assessments.
So misconceptions, and I think that the district has done an excellent job on their master facility plan, but I think the misconception is that all the things involved in that plan are truly needs rather than wants. And my children know the difference between needs and wants, and there's some things that you want that you just simply can't afford. And that's just a fact of life. Families understand that, businesses, nonprofits, everybody that has a checkbook understands the difference between needs and wants. So there are no doubt there are needs. A misconception may be that I'm against a bond. I'm absolutely not against a bond. I did the tours with the superintendent, and there are definitely some absolute needs that need to take place. But saying that we need a new middle school, and there might be a picture there of the beautiful suspended media center across where the buses go, it's hard for me to justify that as a need. That may be a need at say the USOC Museum, which is a beautiful place, but we really have needs that are based on educating our students, and that's really, in my opinion, the primary objective of the district.
Okay, next question for both of you, starting with Jack. How will not approving this affect students, staff, and leadership?
Well, that's a great question, because certainly the district has invested a ton of time and effort into this bond passing. There is no doubt about it, and that certainly was a concern of mine even several months ago that I raised as, in my opinion, overreaching and potentially losing these best funds would be very detrimental for the district. Now, there's nothing that says we can't come back with another bond proposal next year that maybe is more right-sized. I don't know what interest rates are going to be next year. I didn't know gas prices would be 50% higher this year. Inflation, you'll get divergent opinions from people that are actually smart in finance, as opposed to doctors who have proven really not to be smart in finances. So I can't predict the future on how that's going to go. It would be disappointing if it didn't pass, I think, with all the kind of run-up, but I think it's more important that we pass the right issue rather than the expedient issue.
Well, the way I'm going to answer that is
maybe a difficult issue, but one of the things that the school board has dealt with over many years now is the mental health of our kids. And one of the things in this plan is to improve lighting, improve spaces, improve learning areas so that kids can learn in a more coherent way, I suppose. The reality is that they're doing risk assessments on kids almost every day in our schools now. There have been, and I'll keep this out of the paper, Ralph, but there have been probably 12 suicide attempts in our schools in the past year. There were 3 in the last couple of weeks. So the mental health of our kids is extraordinarily important. The school board, in proposing this bond, is trying to address that frankly, the middle school is dark and depressing. There is not a lot of natural light. There are classrooms that are 85 degrees, and by moving this, they're improving all of those issues.
Is it possible that I can follow up on that?
Sure.
So mental health in students is a huge, huge issue. In fact, and I've looked at the data for a couple of months, but a child was 10 times more likely to die from suicide than COVID between the ages of 5 and 19. So that is a huge issue. The district is doing a fantastic job under the superintendent with getting a program together with Children's Hospital that actually will make some significant impact on the mental health of our children through a peer coaching program. So I think that is an excellent program that the district got a grant for to help with that. Having kids in the district, I asked them, what they think of the building. I actually haven't heard any of my kids talk about being depressed because there weren't enough windows in the classroom or things of that nature. COVID is depressing. COVID is depressing for all of us. I think that probably is what's ramped up this increase in the mental health issues rather than the size of the classroom or the lack of windows would be my opinion as somebody that actually studies that.
Next, we have a question for Dan Stewart. Many school buildings in District 14 are in declining condition and very old. Why has it been 20 years since the school district has made capital improvements like constructing a new building?
And I will mention that Natalie and Tina, and I think Mary Smith is still here, so you may have more information on this kind of question or any other question that were asked. So I'd encourage you to speak up because you were told that you couldn't speak to these questions during your part up here. Why has the district not put money into a new building until now?
Yes, that's what the question was.
Sure, okay. The district, I think, has been very fiscally responsible. We had a bond issue that built the Silk building. That bond was paid off just a year ago. So that was the new building that really introduced arts and culture into the schools, and it's a shared use building between middle schoolers and high schoolers. But the school district, on a budget of only about $500,000 a year, is providing capital improvements for all 5 schools. So they frankly have not had the money. 85% of the district's budget is going to salaries and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Would one of the current school board members like to address that?
I think we have to remember about funding in 2008 as probably impacted all of our savings, retirement plans, and our housing values. And that decline hit public education, if you look at the numbers in the state. And because of Gallagher, Amendment 22, and the Tabor Act, we did not recover. I will not get into all of the funding and the discrepancies that the state still owes all of the local education agencies in back funding, but it continues to be an issue. If we wanted to serve students first, if we wanted to pay our staff and stay competitive, and wait for the current bond at that time to pass, which just now has within the last couple years,
we needed to fund that first. It has only been in the last 3 years or so, and then bam, COVID, that in this state we have started to make some progress with funding our teachers reasonable salaries, providing new curriculums, and being competitive, especially in a small town like Manitou. And so while we started ramping up with the facilities plan so that we had over 2 years of planning going forward with this bond, that is where we are today.
Okay, thank you. Next question is specifically for Dr. Sharon. Why is the average bond issue tax increase being used by those opposed to the bond instead of median bond issue tax increase? Can you explain the difference?
Just a quick follow-up on the last question. The 2015 mill levy override that was passed by the generous taxpayers of Manitou Springs included on the ballot maintain and upgrade district buildings, equipment, and grounds. So your previous question was totally appropriate. Why not use the average? Because those are the numbers that I got from the assessor's office. Simple answer.
Yeah. Okay. One more question, and then we'll have wrap-up statements. And this can be for both of you. What percentage of students choice into the district, and how many students who live in Manitou Springs choose to attend schools outside of our district? Do you think the proposed improvements would help reduce that number? And what is our in-town enrollment growth or decline over the past 5 years? And again, I would say after they have a chance that if the school board members might want to address that.
You want to go first? Go ahead. Sure, if you want. That makes sense to actually find the numbers.
Jack probably has more recent numbers than I do. My understanding is that choice students are about 50% of student enrollment. Obviously, choice is the law in Colorado, so it's not something that we can choose necessarily to change as a community. I'm actually really glad that we have choice students in Manitou. It creates stability for the district in budgeting and in programming. And so we have about 1,400 students, Jack said. That number has remained relatively constant over the years, despite the number of choice students gradually increasing. I think that our district is probably at a sweet spot in that with the numbers of kids in each class, our faculty and staff know every student. They know their issues, they know what they need in order to succeed. So that I think is a plus. From a programmatic side, if we were to lose those choice students, and obviously we don't have the number of students within the district that could reinforce that, and frankly I don't know the number of the kids who choice out of Manitou, but one of you two may. If we were to lose those kids, then our programs would suffer in a dramatic way. Somebody suggested to me that we would shift to two-man football because we'd be losing kids who would be going to programs who could support their athletic ambitions. We'd probably lose other activities. So I think choice students are essential for Manitou, and I'm proud that they choose our school to come to.
Do we have data that show how many students are choicing out of District 14 to go to other districts? Do we know that number?
I know that number. It's 107. That's 13%. The average within the El Paso County is about 13.9%. So it's 107 students.
And we don't have a better source than the superintendent, so. Okay, that brings us to wrap-up statements of 1 minute each, and we'll go in reverse order from what we did before. Jack Sharon, you go first.
So it's an honor to talk to you folks again. My entire goal was not to oppose this 4C, but was really to educate the taxpayers so they would understand and have an idea of what it cost. Because in all the information and literature that I've seen, it's not mentioned how much it costs, aside from 43 million with a total payback with principal interest over 25 years up to 76.4 million. So really my hope and my goal was for everybody to be educated so that they would understand they're making an informed decision on costs and benefits. I absolutely think we need a bond. I think $43 million is too much. I think it's probably more when you add that to the $9 million best grant. That's way more than is actually needed in the district. Again, we talked about a new middle school. We talked about the Glaston Media Center, which are beautiful, no doubt, but it costs money to do that, and the money is going to come from the taxpayers that are in the district. So I just want people to make an informed decision, and by saying that and having this time today, I feel like I have done that.
Dan Struhl. Thank you. You know, when Tom Brokaw referred to the World War II generation as the greatest generation, it was because after the war, they invested in the future. They built an interstate highway system, they created a space program, and they built our schools. So now it's our turn, and it's frankly our duty to build schools for the next generation, to keep society functioning. A yes vote on 4C is a smart and forward-thinking investment in our children and in our community. It's an investment needed right now. It stretches our tax dollars and it stretches our purchasing power. It fixes what's needed and builds for tomorrow's learning. It provides what our children need to be successful. The school board's job is to plan for the future, and they've done that with that master plan and with putting the ballot question on the ballot. And it's up to us now to fund it. I'm urging you to continue to let District 14 be the school district that always puts students first. I'd encourage you to please join me in voting yes on 4C. Thanks very much.
Thanks to both of you, Dan and Jeff. That wraps it up. The Pikes Peak Bulletin, the Colorado Publishing House, and the League of Women Voters of the Pikes Peak region thank the candidates for participating this evening, and also to all of you for your interest in being here. We appreciate that you can continue to take all the time you can to learn more about the candidates and issues. You can also learn more at the League of Women Voters website, vote411.org. A huge thanks to the Briarhurst Manor for hosting the forum again this year. And finally, don't forget to vote. Thank you. Have a nice night.